Earlier this week I discussed the possibility of Willow Schnee being the current Winter Maiden, and that the semblance that her children have, both Weiss and Winter, the semblance of glyphs, is a result of the Winter Maiden powers, that when a maiden has a child, some of that magic that the Winter Maiden has results in magic being born within the children, new magic being born, a small amount of it at least, and it manifested itself, in the case of Willow's children, as the semblance of glyphs, how versatile it is and how powerful it is with the aspect of summoning, etc. And after discussing it with people down in the comments below that video, a lot of people mentioned that, well, yes, the semblance likely has some magical aspect to it, but it's likely that it resulted from the Winter Maiden powers further down the family line, that possibly Nicholas Schnee's mother was the Winter Maiden initially, and that's where the semblance originated from. And as I started to think about that and research myself into the history of the Schnee family and the Schnee Dust Company, which honestly we don't have that much to go on with the family history of the Schnees, but it does make sense, at least. And when you even just compare the design of the Winter Maiden or the original Winter Maiden that we have been given from the world of Remnant and things like that, and compare it to the design that we have of the females of the Schnee family currently, Winter, Weiss, and Willow, they all look very similar. They have the same color of hair, and they all go by that blue-white aesthetic. So I started thinking that maybe the Winter Maiden is actually the Schnee legacy, that all Schnees are descended from the original Winter Maiden, and the original Winter Maiden passed the powers down the family line all the way until the current generation. I still fully believe that Willow Schnee is currently the Winter Maiden, and that the semblances did arise from the Maiden powers itself, but that also, at the very least, Nicholas Schnee's mother was also the Winter Maiden. Potentially even further generations past that, but we have no idea or no way to verify that, as all I'm doing is comparing the designs, and that's about all we can do. Because the Schnee family goes to Nicholas Schnee and has mentioned his parents. That's it. But when we look at what his parents actually did, what Nicholas Schnee's parents did, they were most likely part of that founding team that went into Mantle to settle that continent. And when we look at the world of Remnant of Mantle, why exactly did they go up there? People must have had such desperation, as was put it, or they must be pretty desperate, I think was the exact words that were used by Crow as he was narrating that World of Remnant episode. So what would cause people to be that desperate? Well, out of the entire group, I'm guessing there was a variety of different reasons. People too much under the government's thumb. Maybe there was people out or after some of the people in that group, that they were being hunted or something along those lines. But for Nicholas Schnee's parents, if the Winter Maiden was his mother, then they probably wanted to get away, have an escape, because they were probably being hunted by Salem. So they would join that expedition and go to settle this country or this continent that had previously been thought uninhabitable, even hostile to the Grimm that already lived there. With that being the case, Nicholas Schnee's father did everything he could to establish a life for the both of them, and tried to keep it so that his wife was out of the limelight, that her power was never discovered, and that she could live a comfortable life, not having to worry about the fear of Salem. And then, of course, the Great War happened, and Nicholas Schnee's father was a warrior within it, and when Nicholas Schnee was born, soon after the Great War, he took after working in the dust mines with his father, and also became a warrior in his own right. Also likely finding out about the Schnee family legacy, or at least that his mother was the Winter Maiden. And with that being the case, he put his all into learning everything that he could and becoming the best the best person he could be, because the guy is honestly amazing from what little we know about him. And after his father died and he inherited all that his father had, he established the Schnee Dust Company. He set out to establish Atlas as the kingdom it is today. He found that dust vein, I guess, or repository, and established the Schnee Dust Company, made it the titan it is today and the pillar of Atlas. I think all with the central goal of providing more protection for the Winter Maiden itself. He knew the responsibilities that came with that. After learning about the Winter Maiden's existence, he learned about Salem's existence and wanted to find ways to protect against that. Just the way that he established the Schnee Dust Company in general, he established trust between every other nation that existed. He personally oversaw each shipment of dust that went out there, establishing that level of trust so that every kingdom would buy dust from him. And also by establishing a dust trade, he's helping to advance civilization in all the other communities, possibly to create a more trusting community and more advanced community to fight against Salem should she ever make her move. With that being the case, that's how the Schnee Dust Company came to be. At least that's my theory. Unfortunately, Nicholas Schnee, working in the dust mines and everything, you know, that catches up with the guy, and he had to pass on the company. At this point, though, he already had a daughter, and his daughter had married. Of course, that being Willow marrying Jacques Schnee. Now, at this point, I don't know if Nicholas Schnee's wife was still alive, or at the very least his mother being still alive. I would think that if his mother was the Winter Maiden, she would not have passed her powers on to Nicholas Schnee's wife. Rather, she would have passed it from grandmother to grandchild. Willow Schnee, at this point, would be the Winter Maiden if Nicholas Schnee's mother passed away. And with that being the case, Nick knew that, well, we need to keep this a secret. We can't have Willow being in the limelight. Maybe she wasn't even that prepared to take over the company, etc. And that opened the opportunity for Jacques to kind of silver-tongue his way in there to steal the company out from Nicholas Schnee. And then that resulted in Jacques getting the company, Willow, unfortunately, being left in Jacques' care as Nicholas Schnee was now sick, bedridden. He may have even died soon after that. We have no idea if he's still alive. And if he did die, then Jacques became Willow's only support in this world. They did eventually have kids together, eventually going to be successors of the Winter Maiden's power, but Willow did have the suspicion that Jacques only married her for the company. Now, when we have learned that Jacques had told Willow that he only married her for the company, and that was essentially the one action that pushed her over the edge, I think it's more than just Jacques not loving her. I think it's the fact that Willow lost that only support that she had left in the world. She could, if Nicholas Schnee was alive, she probably would have went to him for support. So I'm under the suspicion that he's either dead or bedridden and so sick that he's just not himself anymore. Maybe relying on Klein for assistance and things like that, that he's just not who he was. But when Jacques told Willow that he only married her for the company, that's all he cared about, that's all he wanted, Willow lost that only support. The pressure of being a maiden, potentially without any real support for a decade, finally was starting to wear away at her to the point where she probably went to Jacques and asked him for support. Maybe Jacques didn't even know about the Winter Maiden at this point, or know about the full extent of the powers and the extent of the world, and Jacques pushed her away saying, I don't want anything to do with that, I only wanted the company. That, leaving Willow Schnee to deal with all of this pressure herself, well, that would drive her right to drinking. Drinking is used as a coping mechanism for all of this pressure. She has no one to turn to. Until now. Weiss now knows about the Winter Maiden, now knows about this family legacy. So if she is able to go home and talk to Willow, she can be her new pillar of support, depending on how long Willow ends up surviving after this. Now, another aspect to this is, well, what about Ironwood? Ironwood obviously knows, if Willow Schnee is the Winter Maiden, Ironwood obviously knows this. It seems like Jacques does know some of what's going on, that Willow is at least important in some way, or potentially, or that Ironwood talks to him in such a way that Jacques not completely in the dark about the truth of the world. At least that's my suspicion and the suspicion of a couple other people I've talked to. So, with that being the case, if Ironwood knows that Willow Schnee is the Winter Maiden, why does he leave her under Jacques' care? Well, honestly, what good would it do to have broken her out of Jacques' care up until this point in the series? Honestly, it would have done a lot more harm than good, and I know that's a bit cruel to say considering the condition that Willow is in, but if Ironwood was to make a move and, say, break Willow Schnee out of the Schnee mansion using his military or using force, as Jacques would not give her over willingly, then that would create such hostilities and tension in Atlas, more so than are already there. The two greatest powers of Atlas, the military that Ironwood controls and the Schnee Dust Company, who has so much money they could probably buy their own military, would be at odds. That would be absolute hell for Atlas, and honestly might still happen in Volume 7, Volume 8, at which point that would trigger Ironwood to finally make a move and get Willow Schnee out. But Ironwood was stuck, is stuck, and can't get Willow out. That it's Jacques Schnee is, as bad as it is to say, the lesser of two evils. That Willow being in that situation, in that emotional despair and being forced to alcoholism, is... He's putting the needs of the many over the needs of the few in that sense. The Winter Maiden is still technically safe from Salem and is available if Ironwood ever needs to get her to get the relic or anything like that. It's not a great situation, but that would explain how the Winter Maiden, or how the semblance of glyphs were created, how the Winter Maiden has been passed down, at the very least, from Nicholas Schnee's mother to Willow Schnee, and eventually to Winter or Weiss, and then that would explain why Jacques Schnee's betrayal drove Willow so far into alcoholism that that's her only coping mechanism. Because if she had the suspicion that just Jacques didn't love her, I mean, I feel like just hearing it alone, if it was just that he didn't love her and she had that suspicion, she could have just left him or something like that, but that would have been abandoning her father's legacy, etc. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. If my reasoning makes sense as to the legacy of the Schnees being the Winter Maiden, how Nicholas Schnee passed the company on to Jacques because Willow was already the Winter Maiden, and Jacques' betrayal drove Willow into alcoholism, not only because he didn't love her, but because she no longer had any support for the pressure that she was feeling being the Winter Maiden. And then that would 100% guarantee that Winter or Weiss would be the Winter Maiden, unless, of course, something else happens that would interfere with that. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments below, if all of this makes sense. If you have anything to add, I look forward to discussing with all of you more about this theory, about other theories, and I'll probably make a follow-up video to this one somewhere through the middle of Volume 7, or at the end of Volume 7, once we find out more information. But as I said, I look forward to discussing with you in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one.